Good day, everybody. Thanks for showing up. I know we've been talking about the same thing now for years and years, so a bunch of you hopefully have already seen it. So what I want to do is just show you how to use our tools and create nice environments. Feel free to come down and ask questions. We'll make an interactive thing. Like if you ask me, hey, I want to do this, then I'll see if I can do it for you. Interesting thing about this particular project is when I said that I would do this about a month and a half ago, we were in the process of releasing a whole bunch of cool new products, and we were building HD support for them. So the 3 or 4, we released all of our stuff on the assets to release 3 new products, got it all up and running in 2019, and for the life of us, we couldn't get nice lighting working in HDRP on terrain. So my guys have been working on this pretty much non-stop for the last probably 40 odd hours. They haven't had a lot of sleep. And I got this project at 5:30 this morning. So what you're going to see is bleeding edge stuff, and some of it will be unreleased as well. What I would say is this stuff is moving at particularly HD on Unity is changing very, very quickly and moving very quickly. I think HD will be ready to use in a game, a production environment, in probably 6 months. But at the moment, things are still very much in a state of flux. Obviously, Unity might say something different, but that's my take on it. So the sorts of tools and utilities you probably know us for. Gaia is a terrain and scene generation system. Has anybody heard of Gaia? Not heard of Gaia? All right. Who's used Gaia? A couple. Are you interested in hearing about how to use Gaia to make interesting environments? Because I want to demonstrate to where I can give you value for your time. All right. So I'll create some cool stuff in Gaia. Then what I'll do is I'll add CTS, which is our terrain shading system, onto the terrain, and that'll take our Unity terrain and beef it up to the next level visually. Then Gina 2 is our level design tool. The version of Gina that's on the asset store is the first version of Gina 2. This is something that's had 5 months of additional development on it, and we're in the final stages of stabilizing it now, so it'll be on the asset store in the next 2 to 3 weeks. As soon as I'm comfortable it's good enough. But this is how I'm going to actually add the detail into the environment. And then Path Painter is a terrain and path creation system that we created. It's all about, just drag and draw a path or a river. Sector, which I won't demonstrate, but if you go and look on the asset store, we've just released Sector Complete 2019. This is a system for breaking your environments up into sectors and then streaming them into your game. So we've got a tutorial that will go up tonight where we're doing a 16-kilometre terrain, and I think we changed the frame rate from 80 frames or 8 frames a second to 70 odd frames a second just by streaming in your environment and not having huge environments in Unity. If you want to get good performance in Unity with large environments, you can't have it all in memory at once because Unity or all being shown at once. You have memory constraints, and also Unity just can't really do it very well. And then Pegasus is out. It's a fly-through system, but we can also use it to do things like moving people along paths and characters along paths. So I'll demonstrate most of this stuff, and if you want to ask questions, just ask. The next thing I'll do, and it's obviously a lot to get through in a very short time, is show you our new world enhancement tools. So ambient sounds and ambient skies just released. These are tools that are all about making it really easy to add sound to your game, and then also to make your lighting and your skies nice. If you've done anything with Unity lighting and post effects and the sun and then volume setups for HD and all this sort of stuff, it's actually sort of pretty full on. And even though I've had a guy working on this, digging into this for 5 months, we're still learning stuff and it's also still changing. So the intention with ambient skies is to bring this all into one interface, and all those esoterical sort of, if you open up this profile and go down here and click that, something will happen. We bring that all into one interface and make it easy. And then the new product that's coming soon is ambient AI. And maybe at the end, I'll just run that up so you can see it. It's probably 2 to 3 weeks away. The idea with ambient AI is to make it really simple to add life to your scenes. These are all about adding life to your scenes and bringing them to the next level. So ambient AI is it's desire-driven. So it's sort of like The Sims. Who's played The Sims? Cool. So you know about desire-driven AI. So as soon as the need gets up to a certain level, the AI starts to do it. And some of the cool things that are happening in AI is each AI for each desire will build a plan about what it wants to do. And then it'll start to execute that plan step by step in terms of the behaviors that it executes. This system has been under development for quite some time. We don't use Unity nav mesh or anything like that. We do it all ourselves. It's multi-threaded. And where we're going with it is because we're generating these procedural worlds in real time, we want to be able to have systems that work also with procedural generation. All right, enough talk. The rest is demo. So here's a little environment that I had earlier. We'll boot that. And I'll hide all the errors. There's no errors. If only shipping production systems was that easy. Okay, so we generally put all of our stuff under procedural worlds, and we start with Gaia. So Gaia, what we're trying to do with all of our tools is make it easy and automate a bunch of the typical things you have to do when you set up a new environment. Now, if you're a pro or you really know your stuff, you can bypass a bunch of this stuff, but we're sort of holding your hands. Where we were I was talking to a friend of mine who's a TAFE teacher, and he was saying that new students often will just do 2D environments because 3D is too hard. I said, wouldn't it be as cool as if it was 1, 2, 3? So we did have 1, 2, 3 for quite a while, and then we added 4, which is bake lighting, because that's one of the things you really need to do if you want your environments to look good in Unity. So what sort of controller do you want to use? First person, flying, third person. Over time, we'd like to add VR in here as well, as the systems in Unity become easier to integrate. One of our challenges also as a publisher is if stuff doesn't work, regardless of whether it's our fault, we get a 1-star review. So we only try and show stuff that we can control. So we'll put our flying camera in. What sort of environment are we going to target? So the idea here is Unity can be configured in lots of different ways. Your terrain can be set up in different ways. So what we've done is we use these settings to pre-configure how heavy the terrain and the environment is that we'll set up. And so if you're targeting different environments, an ultralight terrain where we've got a height map resolution of just 17 or something like that, will run really well on mobile. It won't be really, really detailed, but it'll work. Whereas something aimed for powerful desktop, where we've got a pixel error of 1, will be really, really detailed, but would kill a mobile phone. So we'll stick with desktop. Which pipeline? One of the cool things we've built into Gaia and ambient skies is the ability to switch between pipelines. And this thing almost killed us making this because Unity doesn't like doing this. So this is a process where we go through step, and we import the pipeline packages, we import post-processing and all the stuff that you need in your project to get yourself set up. I won't change that. And then how big do you want your environment? So again, it's sort of like a little wizard. The next thing we have is our defaults and our resources and our game objects. The idea here is we take all your settings and we store them away in a scriptable object so you've got them for later. The cool thing about Gaia is once you've done this once with your resources for your game, you never have to do it again. You store that thing forever. So in the keynote, there was a little bit of video from Crowfall, and I know the level design, the environmental artist there, and they used our tools for everything in that video. Gaia created the terrains, they used Gaia to texture it, Gina placed all the stuff in the scene, they used Pegasus to fly through the scene, they even used Pegasus to animate the characters through the scene. So if you go to crowfall.com, everything there is our tech. Even CTS, a beta of it, was used to texture the terrain. And for me, as a guy running in South Turramurra, this was a really cool thing to see how a pro studio was using our stuff. Anyway, enough talk. So let's create our terrain. So here we have a terrain that you can't see. This is one of the joys of HD. So I'm just going to quickly get some light onto this. So I'll use another tool of ours, Procedural Worlds, Ambient Skies. And we'll start that up. And as soon as it starts, we should get some light. And then we'll just close that again. And open it again, and now it should be all nice. It's put in some fog. Let's maybe turn that off for the moment. Turn off post-processing. Again, this is part of the value of the tools that we offer, is that the idea is all this stuff just automates for you. So we've got our terrain, and you can create terrains yourself manually, or you can use our automated system to do it for you. So I'm going to automate, and then I'm going to show you how to manually beef it up. But of course, you can do it any which way you want. Excuse me. So we'll go to our session manager. Now on our website, we have over 100 tutorial videos, so anything that you see, there's a video on it somewhere. And if you actually go into the tool itself, if you go into more, video tutorials, ticketed support, help us as go, yada, yada, yada. So you can easily get access to more information to show you these different techniques. I'm going to open up the random terrain generator. I'm just going to go add stamps. So what's actually happening is Gaia's got over 150 pre-generated stamps. The actual idea for stamping came from doing fractal maths, and fractals, which are just a mathematical equation, are really, really hard to control. So one day I had this little thought, what if you could actually take the power of fractal stamps and turn them into a 3D object that you can control? And that actually, fractal generation, take the interesting parts out of it and then automate it, allow people to treat it like a 3D object. And that was how the stamping system came to be. Oh, I've actually added an extra lot of stamps instead of pressing play. Try the right button next time. So now what it's doing is it's actually taking these height maps and mixing them and blending them to create us an environment. This is a 2K by 2K environment, and I made it an island. Sometimes what I find is this does something that's super epic, and sometimes I go, oh, that's terrible. And the cool thing is, when it finishes, that we can easily change it. So I accidentally added 20 stamps instead of 10. All right, it's done. I'm going to reset that just to show you that it can be done. And I'll flatten my terrain, and then we'll do it again. You can choose the border style and also the percentage chance of the different terrain types that are going to get generated. And it will then dynamically choose stamps of those types. So hit play again. The other interesting thing about Gaia is that everything you do is stored in a session file, which means you can replay it. So if you've got 2 different projects and you're sharing information because you've both got Gaia, then the sessions, all you have to do is exchange the session file, and you can recreate this environment in a different project or a different scene. So there we go. That's a fairly boring terrain. Let's beef it up a bit. So I go Procedure Worlds, Gaia, show the manager again. And I deleted my stamper because it was busy messing with the stamper and I want a nice clean one. So I'll just show another stamper. And then what I'm going to do is maybe add something over here. So I'll go to my stamps directory. We're actually about to release another pack with another 80 stamps shortly. So go into data, stamps. We've categorized them into different types of environment. So let's add maybe a mountain. So what we've done with them is to allow you to visualize them, we've created grayscale images. And where it's white, it's high, and where it's black, it's low. So let's grab, this thing looks interesting, the Andes Mountains. What else do I want to do here? Navajo Mountain. Let's grab that. Cool. So there is our preview stamp. What we're going to do is move it over here and rotate it. So you can't do this with fractals, it just doesn't work really. And then I'll just unground it. Move it around. Anyway, that'll do. Let's go stamp. So now we've got another interesting area to our environment. The next thing I'm going to show you is another cool thing that we added not that long ago, which is called our enhanced terrain. So this is a whole bunch of extra things you can do to your terrain to make it more interesting. So what I'm going to do is just run with the default, and this is a quantized filter. So this allows you to create terraces in your environment, and terraces are cool because they're flat areas which create interesting gameplay. And it allows you to use curves, so you can control how much of the raw terrain comes through and how much you're actually influencing it. So if we go perform, we've now terraced it. If you want to see that again, oops, went twice, go back, perform. So we've added more definition with our water and we've created some flat areas. Next thing I'm going to do is texture our terrain. Where's our window gone? Here it is, it's hiding. So we'll create our spawners. The process of adding resources to your terrain is called spawning. So in those resource files that I talked about before, we've got all the information about the rules and the textures and the assets we're applying to our terrain. And what we're actually doing is running them against the terrain. These spawners are highly configurable and they allow you to do a lot of different things and automate a lot of different things. So there we go, we've now got an interesting terrain and it's been nicely textured. Now, I look at this and it sort of makes my eyes want to bleed a bit because it's standard Unity terrain. So things like tiling is not very well handled. You can see all the tiling there. There's not much that's interesting in this environment from my perspective. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go Window, Procedure Worlds, CTS. So we're going to add our CTS shader to the terrain. So it's just added it. And then what I'm going to do is inside of Gaia, these textures are from Nature Manufacture, and he's another amazing publisher in the asset store. So I'm going to add my CTS profile to this environment. So I just click on it, and then we go Apply, and check out what happens to our terrain. Nothing. Oh, there we go, something happened. Cool, so now we've made our terrain look a lot more interesting. We've got some rocks, we've got triplanar on our cliffs to break up tiling, and you can do a lot of stuff with CTS. Let's just add a bit of snow. So if I open up this, turn up our snow, and let's maybe change our minimum height, make it a bit higher. Let's make this height range a bit smaller. And one of the cool things that you get with CTS is instant feedback. So if I bring this height down a bit. So now we've added a bit of snow at the top of our environment. Okay, so we've got a nice terrain. We've got some nice textures. Let's put a path into our terrain. So now I'm introducing another tool which is called Path Painter. So window, Path Painter, Path Painter. So what you can do with Path Painter is create rivers, you can create ledges, you can create little roads and so on, and it works nicely with Unity terrain. So let's create a path down and out of our area here. Just want to work out where I'm going to do my trees. This is sort of interesting down through here. Got a bit of water in there. Maybe we'll do it in here. So I'm going to click on Path Painter and I'm going to draw a path through my scene. Now let's look at this in a bit more detail and see what's happened, because it doesn't look like much has happened, but something actually has. So if I hit the Shift key, what I can do is I can make my path bigger. See how it's flattening the terrain? It's a bit big. And I can say, let's choose this texture for our path. Maybe go up a bit. And then I can do things like, let's change the type of border, the barrier we've got in it. If I get down a bit lower, we can make it follow the terrain, or we can make it a straight line so you can see we're actually lifting the terrain. And then maybe we can lift it out, or maybe we can make a bit of a river. So just lift it slightly, change our border textures. Now this is something that's rather cool. We are changing the strength, and because CTS is using height maps to blend the textures together, then you can start to do things like pop rocks out of the grass. So our underlying texture here is grass, and if I modify this strength again, you can see we can make this thing, we can leave it as it was, or we can start to bring in more and more detail. Let's make our embankment a bit smaller. So now we've got a more pronounced thing, and then maybe let's just bring this a little bit closer into the terrain. So anybody who's ever had to do that, that's quite a painful process to do by hand. All right, so now we've got a nice environment, we've added a nice texture or a nice shading to it, we've created a path. Let's start to bring this to life, and then I'll start to add more and interesting features to it. So let's add some skies and some water and all that sort of stuff, because this is looking pretty ghastly at the moment. So we'll go Window, Procedural Worlds, Gaia. So most of what we've done in Gaia has been in Gaia so far, and we've dropped out of Gaia to add some interesting shading, and we've just used the Path Painter to get a path. Now we're going to add our player, post effects, screenshotter. Actually, I'll do one more thing. Let's just add some game objects. Now, one of the reasons why I'm being a little bit, I'm jumping around a bit, is because this is HDSRP, and some things work well and some things don't. Unity Terrain and HDSRP does not support grass yet. So there's no point me putting on a really beautiful and rich grass, because it just won't work. You'll get lots of pink. So what actually Gaia is doing here is it's iterating across all the terrain, and it's looking for flat bits, and it's looking for areas in the terrain that can actually add the game objects we want to add. So if you see, if I do this, it's a bit slow because Unity is actually updating all of its colliders, which is a bit of a process, but we're interrogating the terrain, and we're putting in little villages and points of interest and stuff like that. So let's have a look. Are we done? No, we're still going. I think we're done now. All right, so we've added a bunch of stuff. So what actually have we added? Let's have a look. So this stuff that I'm showing you, all of this stuff is inside of Gaia, but you don't need to use Gaia's stuff. You can use your own. This is a great example of why I shouldn't have done this. What we've got here, so here we've retextured the terrain under our little farm. We've added in and blended with the terrain some little farmhouses and created a cool little thing, but we've also got some Unity grass. And this is a great example of HDSRP. It's still not quite ready for prime time because it doesn't support it. So let's see if I can get rid of that. There we go. Isn't that wonderful? It's looking a bit better now. All right, so Gaia's actually iterated through the terrain, and added a bunch of interest to it. And the next thing I'm going to get Gaia to do is add some water and some interesting skies and start to bring this to the next level. The pink trees, we're also, Unity doesn't support speed tree yet in HDSRP, so, and they're built into those little things, so I can't get rid of them. So now we'll do our last, or second to last step. I'm not going to do the last one because it'll take forever, but we're going to add some skies, water, and just make this thing look a little bit better. So there we've got some water, and skies are not looking that great because we need to use ambient skies, so I'll just beef up our skies and everything else. Let's go. Usually Gaia would do it for you, but because we've got ambient skies in the project, we assume that you're going to use ambient skies because it's better. And boom, we've suddenly made this thing look a hell of a lot better. So, in fact, if we turned on post-processing, you get another look, a completely different look again. I'll change that because that's burning my eyes and turn it off for the moment. All right, so let's see what we've got. So, just wait for HD to catch up, get that out of the road, maximize this. So we've created our environment, we've added some interesting texturing to it, we've added a path, and now we want to take it to the next level and start to add in objects and stuff. Is this the sort of stuff that people want to see? Because if you want me to change the way I'm going, I'm very happy to. Like say, oh, I want to see this new feature, then I'll just show it to you. All right, so let's add some trees in. So I'm going to focus on this little area around here. Now I'm going to use Gina. We could use Gaia to do this, but Gaia in this project has been set up to use the old speed trees, which are not supported in HDSRP. I'm almost tempted to rip them out completely because they're such an eyesore. Almost gone. Yeah, they're done as, I'd have to rip them all out. Not in this demo. All right, so I'm going to go to Gina. So Gaia is it's like a big roller brush. If you're doing a big area, Gaia does all the heavy lifting for you. Then if you want to get into the detailed level design, and actually I could press a button, and if speed tree was supported in this train, I could fill it full of vegetation and grass and stuff as well in Gaia, but it's not. So what I'm going to use is Gina, and Nature Manufactured, he's got some amazing assets in the store. He's got some really beautiful trees, and he's built HDSRP shaders for them. In lightweight, Unity Terrain now supports grass, but it doesn't support trees yet, speed tree yet. But in the next release, I believe they'll add speed tree support. So for lightweight, you'll be able to get some quite nice trees. And then HD, I'm not sure where that's coming because they wouldn't give me an answer. Sometime was the answer. All right, so Gina. I'm going to add a Gina spawner. So this is the new version of Gina, the one that's coming. And as I move around here, you can see it's actually automatically showing and detecting collisions. One of the things I do with Gaia is I put colliders around those things because when you're spawning, you don't want to have something going through something, and we need to work out where Gaia's been so we don't go there again. So Gina's actually showing that for us. So what I'm going to do with Gina is, let's get some rocks and stuff and put it around here. Now, I will remind you that this project isn't my project, so I have to find it. Quixel. Has anybody ever used Megascans or even heard of Megascans? Yep, most of you. So they've got a really cool tool called Megascans Bridge, and there's a live plugin that you can get. And if you're using Bridge, you can hit export, and it'll actually import that asset straight into your project, and it'll set it up, depending on the pipeline, it'll set it up for you. So it's a great way to get really cool assets in really, really quickly. So let's go to our Quixel assets here. So we use the live bridge to get these in. And let's have a look at our rock assembly and see what it looks like. Go to our prefab here. Don't like that one. It'll be okay. So let's go and drag this prefab onto Gina. Let's scroll down. So now Gina understands about this rock. So I want to make this rock a bit bigger. So I'm going to increase the size. And let's have a look. Okay, we just added a rock. Gina's automatically embedded it into the terrain a bit. It's conformed it to the terrain and it's placed it there for us. So the next thing I might do is add a few rocks. So instead of 1, I might add 5. And Gina has put a throw distance of 1.7 meters. These tools are all highly configurable, and there's all sorts of algorithms for how we distribute assets in your scene. So for one, if you're doing something like a fence, you can actually have it place all the fences in a line as you go through the scene. Sometimes you want a more organic spawn, so we've got a really nice, we sort of specialises in organic spawns, so it'll look like a nice little copse of trees and so on. And then things like if you're putting a building or something else, you can actually control the exact rotation. This tool, what we're doing with it in the next release, is you'll be able to, let's say you've got a village, like an entire village, or even 10 villages, because one of the things we're doing is visual content tax as well. You'll get a special version of Gina, and let's say you've got a mountain range and a nice flat area. You'll be able to go click and it'll fit the village into that flat area and dynamically conform it and even retexture the terrain underneath it. But you might go, I don't like that, so you get Control I, iterate, iterate, iterate. So you'll be able to flick, flick, flick until you get just the look and just the layout you want. So let's actually add a few more of these things. Between 1 and 5, we'll spread them out a bit more. So it's starting to put a few more of these things in. These haven't got colliders, I don't think, so it'll vary a bit. And let's turn this from a single spawn to a painted spawn and just paint in some rocks. So adding in some rocks around our area here. And the whole idea with this is to make it easy for you to add stuff. Now let's add some trees. To add another Gina spawner. So rather than trying to do the entire terrain, I'm just going to build out this area here. So if I go to our Nature Manufacture Assets, and let's add some trees. Again, the reason we're using these is because they actually work with HD. There's not very much that actually works with HD at the moment. So we'll add this poplar into Gina. We'll add that one as well, and maybe that one. There are different ways. You can actually add trees out of the terrain, or you can add grass out of the terrain, or you can add textures out of the terrain. But I'm actually adding them as prefabs, and when we're actually spawning them, they'll actually be childed to the terrain, so that when you're doing streaming and those sorts of things with tools like Sector, everything's automatically put into the right place. So let's have a look. Here we go. Now our throw distance in this, think of this like the throw distance of a seed. It's quite a way away from where I was. So what I'm starting to do now is paint in different versions of these trees. Rather than just doing one, let's do, say, between 10 and 20. And we'll make our throw distance already quite large. And just go over here. So we're starting to add in different areas. If it finds a collision, it won't allow me to do it. And it's also, notice how I'm clicking here. This is one of the rather cool things about Gina as well, is it's actually Gina is got a whole bunch of really sort of cool ways of selecting. So I'm hitting the Shift key and I'm clicking around in the terrain, and what you can actually see is we're sampling the terrain. If I go up here, it's going to be sampling there, and then I can go, okay, so let's look at this thing. I'll do it from above and show it a bit more detail here. You know, I can go, I only want to place trees on this texture, or I could go only in this height and slope range based on where you're sampled, or between a min and a max, and a whole bunch of different sorts of things. So let's go to our slope and change our slope range. Notice dynamically as I'm changing the tolerance in this thing, you can see Gina is showing you where similar terrain is. This is very powerful. It allows you to go, I want this type of asset to go in this type of environment. I'll just add some more trees in here. I'll stick it into paint mode and just paint some trees. Gina has a really cool undo button, and you can actually go back step by step, except obviously that one's not working right now. So depending on what you're doing. Gina, this is still very much in development. We think probably another few weeks until this is ready to come out to the asset store. Where were we? Over here. When you start to do this sort of stuff at scale, these sorts of tools, they're worth their weight in gold. I could put a lot more different types of assets into here. Probably the last thing I'll put into this are some things like little bushes and a bit of grass and stuff here. Now Unity grass doesn't work, but Nature Manufactures is mesh grassed and it's got HD shaders for it. So let's go to Gina again, add another spawner. See me changing the range of the spawn here. All right, so let's add some grasses. Maybe add some bushes as well. Go to add some little bushes here. Just another cool little thing with Gina. You can, so I'm adding these bushes, and there they are. Inside of Gina, we store the details about the assets you're adding in what we call a prototype. And you can go into those prototypes and change how that prototype is being applied into your environment. So in this case, we've got, do we want it to conform to slope? So we can embed things like a house or a tree is often straight up and down. Or if we want to conform like a rock or whatever, like smaller grass cover and that sort of thing conform to slope quite often. We can change its forward rotation. So if it's a big building or something like that, you can work out, if your model isn't reset properly, then you can counteract for that. We can control a lot of different aspects. If we go into advanced, we can actually go and control a lot more about how this thing goes into your environment. Things like, do we want to automatically configure batching and lighting and that sort of stuff? We can add light probes for you automatically. And these are all very, very powerful if you want to build tools that work well, or scenes that work well. So I'll go back to simple mode, and I can embed this into the terrain if I want. I can change its rotation. Here I'm rotating it in any direction. And I can also change its chance of spawning. So let's say we had, not with this one, but quite often I'll get a biome of trees, and I might have, old, like a log or something like that, and big down to small, and I'll change the relative chance that these things will spawn. So for example, my bottom willow here, let's say I only want that to spawn 30% of the time, and I want this one to spawn, whoops, that's a rotation. I want this to spawn 60% of the time, so you can build up these dynamic ranges. So let's go back to this thing, and I'm going to put more than just one at a time. Let's make it 20, from say 5 to 20. And let's make them be a little bit further apart. And let's go, okay, that's looking good to me. Now, paint mode is one of my favorite things. So I'll just wait for Unity to catch up. So now all of a sudden, we're adding a lot more interest into this environment. It's all very mono, you know, the colors I've got here I'm not really happy with at the moment. So we'll change that in a sec as well. I'll see if I can find something with some color. But all of a sudden we've added a bunch of extra interest into this. So let's see if we can find something that's got a bit of color, maybe a grass, some flowers, that sounds good. So again, same thing. What do these things look like? There's a bit of white there. Not much there. Chamomile, yeah, that looks good. These sorts of things, I'd probably rather put them into as a terrain texture, but because that's not working, I can't. So we're just winging it here. And we'll put a bunch of these things. Selected it. I don't know why it's not letting us do that. Here we go. Now it's fixed itself. And so it's hard to see. If we get down close, you can see we've got our grasses and ground cover. So let's have a look at this now. Unity's coming. All right, so if we go into this a little bit closer here, I really want to get that in my scene. Where is it? Over here. So here's this environment that we've been creating. So we've got some grasses, we've got some bushes, got a bunch of rocks, forget that, and starting to look okay. Now I want to increase my water so it's more interesting here. So I'll grab my water. So what I'm doing is I'm just freewheeling, right? This is how I often design stuff. I have an idea about what I want to do, then I just add stuff. So I go to my ambient water and select my water. And let's raise our water until it's actually in our scene. Here we go. It's looking a little bit nicer. Maybe add a little bit more height to it. That's probably about right. So we've added some water, we've added a bunch of bushes and so on, and you could go on like that. There are buttons here. If I do it, I can always undo it, I suppose. So let's go to our, actually I don't want to do this from a performance perspective, but I could, you know, run these trees. This poplar, for example, and I could go, instead of just shift click where I get a bunch of them, I might make that environment a bit area. I go control click, I'll control shift click. Are you sure you want to do a global one? I'll just show it to you. Do global, yeah. So now it's actually looking for similar terrain over your entire environment, and it's going to put it into our scene. Boom, so we've just added stuff all over our environment. Everything I've just shown you works the same way. So let's say you find, oh, rocks should be, this type of rock should be in this type of biome, on this type of texture. That control click thing would take what you've just worked out and automate it across the entire scene. Now, because I'm using prefabs and I haven't got any sort of optimization going on in this, I might just undo that one because I don't want it to run at 1 frame a second. All right, so we've got some stuff in here. I'm not really happy with the lighting, so let's have a play with that. So I go Window, Procedural Worlds, Ambient Skies, and I'm going to change it from ambient, well actually we'll use ambient, but we'll stick it to, we could use a HDRI sky, or we could go procedural, for example, and there's our traditional procedural sky. Let's go back for our HDRI. We could choose which skybox you wanted to use. So let's go, flick, flick. What we're actually doing here is, in addition to changing the skybox, we're also changing all the lighting and all the settings. So this is actually optimized. We haven't really done much with HD. We haven't optimized this for HD yet. So you're seeing stuff that's more designed for lightweight. But you can see how it's adapting and changing really, really quickly. We can do things like, and this, if you've done this before yourself, this is hugely tedious to go and work out where all these things are, but we can maybe rotate our skybox. What's also happening is we're rotating our sun with it. We can change the exposure, maybe make it a bit more moody, bring down the light a bit, maybe bring it up a bit, depends what you want to do. In HD, you can see these settings make a lot of difference to how the lighting looks in your scene. We can change our sun pitch. So this is all stuff that if you know Unity, you can do it, but it's just not that easy. Change our fog settings, our ambient lighting settings, sun settings. Let's make it maybe a little bit brighter, or maybe a little bit less bright. Let's look at how our shadows are setting up. They're only set up at 150 meters. Let's beef that out a bit so we get shadows further into the distance. And again, if you're doing HD stuff, there are all these volumes and different sorts of interesting settings you need to do for things like contact shadows and micro shadows on rocks. So that stuff you can do manually, but what we're doing here is automating it for you. So let's add our post-processing back in. Now that hurts my eyes, and we haven't done our post-processing for HD yet. So I'm going to take one and manually put it in. So let's go to Global Post-Processing, open this up, and instead of selecting this one, which isn't configured properly, we'll find something else. Unite Sydney, there you go. So this is bringing us back to better light. Now I won't bake this because in order to get the best out of Unity, you need to bake things, and we don't have time. So let's just start this now, and I realise I've got only a short amount of time. So while I'm doing this, feel free to ask questions. And if there are no questions, then I'll just add some audio to this as well. I really wish those pink trees weren't there. So we've added all this stuff manually. I forgot to add wind in, so let's add that. Yep.
If you're using it for architectural rendering, is it possible to add latitude, longitude, and correct sunlight characteristics for real-world locations?
In this tool, no. With the next generation stuff that we're working on, we are looking at things like I've already prototyped importing digital elevation maps, and with the new framework we're working on called Origami, the intention is to actually support the real world. We did some cool stuff with Google, and we've been talking to Mapbox as well as sources of real world data. It's a process, it's something that we're still building into our tools though. Mostly where we come from is doing things with the Unity community and the games community. And where we're going to is to take this out of just the games industry and into industry as a whole. Let's just add some audio to this. Let's wait for it to finish up. Cool. So I'm really sorry about the look of this. I seriously considered not showing HD. because I don't think it's ready. I selected the wrong button, damn it. That means it put my wrong post-processing back. Ambient sounds. So there's another tool. To add sound manager to your scene, you just hit the button. This is our approach with all this stuff. Just hit the button and it's supposed to work. Mostly we succeed at that. So here we've got a whole bunch of sequences of music. So a sequence, if I look at it, come up in my inspector, this could be one clip, or if we look at our background music for nature, this could be a whole bunch of music clips. And what this system does is it dynamically merges all of your sounds together and loops them for you. And you can do things like location-driven, volume-driven, event-driven. It's got all sorts of modifiers and so on to change that. So let's just quickly add a sound volume around our lake here. So I'll go new audio area. We'll call this one lake. And I'm going to put this near my lake. So where's that thing gone? Here it is. This is a 3D volume. Let's give it some size. So this is about now enhancing your terrain or enhancing your environment. So here we go. Here's our sound volume. If I bring this out a bit. Any other questions while I'm sitting here playing around with things?
Is it possible to add stuff like overhangs, land bridges, that kind of stuff?
You can. Unity Terrain doesn't support it, but if you're using third-party assets, absolutely. Gina will have no problems putting them in for you. And Gina, it can spawn as easily on terrain as it can on other meshes, so you can basically just construct those things. It really depends on how you set it up. There is a rock and overhang system on the asset store, and I have never used it, but that could be pretty cool to look at too. Any other questions?
Can Gina rotate objects based on the slope of terrain? So in the case of like cliffside rocks, if you've only modeled one side of it, could you have that facing upwards from the slope?
Yes, we've been working with different asset packs to aggregate objects, for example. So I actually made Gina to do cliffs for Crowfall. And what you do is we're looking for certain areas, like a certain height or a certain texture, and then we're choosing how we want to rotate it. And then what we're actually doing is placing those objects and chunking them in. So I don't have anything here to show that, but yeah, Gina's awesome for making cliffs. In fact, that's the reason why I made it. Any other questions?
One of the big problems with these kinds of terrains that I see a lot is like putting the sound of the ocean around all of the sides of the island. Does
Yep.
your ambient sounds thing?
It's a good question. We have, this is the first release of it, like it's literally hot off the presses. We have this concept of volumes, but we also have shapes. So 3D, 2D, and 1D. And one of the things I want to add to it is the ability to occlude. So we'll add, create two shapes, one for around the ocean, for example, one to block it off. What I'm going to do with this, in fact, for my little bit of stuff here, I think that's at about 52 meters. I'm going to use, see if I've got some, sure I've got a lake sound. I know we've got, here we go, water. I'm going to add some water to it. And instead of making a 3D sound, let's make it a 1D sound. So this is an example of what you're talking about, but not quite as sophisticated as what you're talking about. So make the fall off, say, 3 meters. And basically what's happening here is if you're within 3 meters, the closer you get to water level, the stronger the sound will come. So let me just quickly demonstrate that because I am 2 minutes short of being out of time. Oh, AI. All right, if I'm allowed to, I'll quickly show it. Quickly just run this. Go over to our water. What we should be starting to see. We've got a thing called a monitor. Let's add some other stuff in. Like let's add, so there's our sound. That's a bit loud. So, too loud. And then let's go to our sequences, and one of the cool things about ambient sounds is you can play with stuff. So let's go to our, say, our nature music. It's just starting to come in now. Because it's looped and it's designed to be blended and merged in together. So these are volumetric, and the interesting thing is once you start to, let's add some birds and crickets and things. Once you start to layer this stuff on, it's amazing how quickly you add a really nice ambience to your scene. So I'll quickly show the AI, show it in another project, and I'm...
While that's loading, can you use Gaia to place sound?
No. Gaia actually does come with a bunch of sounds. So we provide nighttime sounds, daytime sounds, that sort of stuff.
Sorry.
But so what was that?
I meant Gina, like if you they spawn bird noises across a whole landscape.
I haven't tried it, but maybe you could. So actually, ambient sounds will do that for you anyway. It creates 3D sounds if you want, as in, you know, positional sounds. You can make them all over the place, or you can make them relative to a player or a space. If we saved those areas as prefabs, which we haven't tried to do, you could probably spawn them in as well. We'll give it a crack and see what happens. Take 30 more seconds and I'll just show you the AI, because they're cool. We'll wait for you. Any more questions while waiting for this to load up? There's one over here. Scratch. All right, so let me just press play in this scene. Oh, I better turn on my audio as well. Might as well get the full effect. So here you can see a 3D positional audio, and then here's another one. And then we're going to turn on our AI director and make sure we're in maximize mode. We're using Pegasus to fly through this. And this is actually built in instead of HD. So it's just all starting up. Here come our AI. Here we go. So they've got some little AI wandering around in the terrain there. We've got some dragons floating around. And the idea of this is you just basically press the button and it will do it for you. It's designed to all be, as I said, multi-threaded. Each AIs will be able to transition between different states so they can have different behaviour. They're desire-driven and they'll actually make a plan for how they'll achieve and fulfil their desire. So there you go. There's our next product that's coming soon. We're really, really excited about ambient AI. All right. Thank you very much.